treated similarly. The great philosopher Sir Paul McCartney put it very well when he said, "It's staggering when you think about it. Vegetarianism takes care of so many things in one shot: ecology, famine, cruelty. If you care about the environment, global poverty, or animals, you have to agree with me that it is unethical to eat meat." Thank you.
My turn. Bear with me, I don't exactly have as fancy a presentation, but very low tech. I got paper and pen and stuff like that. So, can everyone hear me? Do I need to use a microphone? Can everyone hear me? Even in the back? We good? Okay, use the mic? Yes. Okay. Test, 1, 2, 3, there we good? Good. All right. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin my remarks, I would like to thank the Vegetarian Society for hosting this event and inviting the Harvard Speech and Parliamentary Debate Society to participate. Thanks go to, I'd like to echo Ms. Friedrich's remarks and thank Jessica and Lean for organizing this event. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Friedrich for participating today and taking time out of what is, I'm sure, a very busy schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, we're faced today with a question that is deceptively simple. Is it ethical to eat meat? Yet the answer to this question is one of actual great importance and has significant bearing on the conduct of our daily lives. If I can prove to you that eating meat is ethical, knock on wood, then some of you might reconsider entirely your dietary habits. So I'd like to start very quickly with what you gave us, Mr. Friedrich. Let me say first that you gave a very compelling presentation, thoroughly researched. And while this is to your credit, I must say it puts me at a bit of a disadvantage. I have nowhere near the resources that PETA has to conduct in-depth research on these issues. And perhaps more importantly, I have nowhere near the level of expertise to evaluate the validity of some of the claims you present. This doesn't mean I don't accept them as being true. It's simply that this debate and this format cannot be one of facts or figures. It has to be one about ideas, things which we can all, as general people, relate to and engage with. So the first few objections that I have to your material, the material you presented, are questions which, in the long term, I think are relatively unanswerable in the format we have here, but are objections that I think should be raised notwithstanding. The first is the environmental impact you say is caused by current livestock practices. I will not disagree that factory farming causes significant harm to the environment. What I will contend, however, is that if we were to switch from farming livestock to farming high-protein vegetables, there will also be a significant environmental impact. Current agricultural techniques are far from what we might call sustainable, and the prevalent use of harmful pesticides, which in turn cause environmental harm in their production. You might argue that we can use organic methods of farming, but that would be A, expensive, B, not yield the same amount of food as current practices, and C, there are equivalent techniques for farming livestock in sustainable ways. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. I don't think you've proven today that it is inherently damaging to the environment to farm cattle or poultry, and until you do, I don't think this argument can really stand. Again, these are questions that cannot be proven with data over the long term, and I think they're somewhat extraneous to our discussion today, but I think it's somewhat dishonest not to note these objections. Secondly, with regards to animal suffering, I agree that the conditions animals face with factory farming are appalling and are clear examples of animal cruelty, regardless if they're pigs or poultry. If they were cats or dogs, we would clearly consider these examples of animal cruelty. However, the idea of taking into consideration the pain animals feel is based fundamentally upon a utilitarian calculus, an ethical system which has severe problems, not least of which the prime proponent of such a view on animal welfare, Peter Singer, has used such a system to support things like eugenics, which I think sort of tears at all of our moral intuition. So, secondly, how do we meaningfully draw a distinction between the pain felt by animals and that felt by humans? Perhaps more simply, what is the unit we are using to measure this pain, the suffering that animals are feeling in current livestock practices? What is a utile within this utilitarian calculus? Can we use it as a system for conducting our affairs? Things which are not easily quantifiable, like the amount of pain we receive from an action, or these kind of unquantifiable things defy this ethical system, and they render it incapable of providing us guidance in this particular situation. Again, facts and figures simply cannot be used to answer the question at hand. And even if we could measure pain in a meaningful way, what would our calculus tell us to do if we were presented with a situation where we could prevent the equal suffering of, say, a dog or a human child? How would we decide between the two if they each suffer equal losses to utility? My intuition tells me that we save the human child. But why? Further, still imagine if that dog was about to harm a human child. And to prevent that harm to the child, we would have to inflict more than the equivalent harm to the dog. For example, to stop him from biting the child, we would have to put the dog down. My own intuition tells me that we must, again, side with saving the child, but to use a utilitarian model of understanding that would support the complete opposite conclusion, that because we do more harm to the dog, we should let it bite the child. I find this problematic. So, and furthermore, if we push the point further, where do we draw the line with regards to what creatures we consider capable of feeling pain? Is it simply mammals, or does it include reptiles, fish, insects? Does the degree of pain differ between species? Does a cow feel more pain than a chicken? And even if we believed in a utilitarian model, could it not be possible that at some point the suffering of animals could be reduced, that it is outweighed by the pleasure that humans receive from consuming meat? At that point, it would seem that eating meat would become ethical, and that there is no absolute ban on meat consumption, which is, I think, is the burden of proof that lies with Mr. Friedrich in today's debate. These are questions that need to be answered by this utilitarian philosophy, and indeed, I think, by Mr. Friedrich himself, if we are to turn to it for support. So, although I've noted my main objections to Mr. Friedrich's analysis, I'd like to get back to the matter at hand, and I think I should clarify the position I would like to take in today's debate. I do not believe that meat should be farmed using the techniques that were just here described by Mr. Friedrich. They are unconscionable and should not be permitted. I think we should be moving toward a practice of sustainable, organic, and ethical farming that reduces the environmental impact of livestock and the suffering that they endure. I would even go so far as to argue that we should probably cut down on our meat consumption. But I still believe that under the right conditions, it is permissible to kill and eat animals. In fact, I think the position that I wish to stake out should be the focus of today's debate, because it is somewhat unreasonable to ask me to defend the kind of severe practices that Mr. Friedrich described. What really is at issue is, under the best conditions possible, is it still legitimate for us to kill and consume animals? Even under those best conditions, if Mr. Friedrich can prove that it's unethical, then fine, I will concede. But I simply don't think that he's done that so far in today's debate. But let's return again to the question at hand. Is it ethical to eat meat? Or let's think of it in another way. Why is it wrong to kill animals? Is it because of the pain and suffering they endure? This is again a product of that utilitarian model that we've dealt with already. Or is it because of an inherent right that animals have to be protected from harm, including death, due to their sentience or some other standard? Why do we have human rights? Perhaps is a good place to start answering some of these questions. There are many reasons for human rights, a proper discussion of which would take up more time than I have to speak. But the reasoning I would like to put forward is the idea of rights stemming from an agreed-upon social contract that we have, in theory at least, all agreed to a set of rules by which we will conduct our affairs, so that we might live our lives according to a set of values that we each individually determine. We place a value on freedom in a liberal democratic society. And so we create a contract that is embodied in a constitution where we all agree that each of us is bestowed rights to freedom of speech, association, etc., with a reciprocal responsibility that in enjoying these rights, we do not infringe on the rights of others. For example, I'm allowed to own a gun, but if I shoot someone with it, I'm infringing on their right not to be harmed, and then I then forfeit my right to own or operate that gun. This contract is then valid so long as this contract is valid then, so far as society is bound by it, agrees to the terms, so long as the general will of that society or collected values align with the values enshrined in its constitution.